Hello everyone, I'm glad to be here. It's October the 2nd, 10 days before the Hawaii Ironman or so, and it's been a busy last month. I apologize for much of my absence with consistent conflict that I have and will have on Thursdays for the coming weeks, so we'll be out on that. But Mondays even last week was hindered not by me traveling but by having a rather nasty mouth surgery that left me with a mouth like a ploughed field. But here we are. We'll get this session in, and then get through Hawaii Ironman and come back and be engaged with a relaunch of Meetings with Matt, with some redesign and the way that we're going to go about video communication, video education, interaction with you guys, the athletes. All of that to come. We'll peel the covers off of that in the coming days and weeks. But today, what we want to talk about, as I felt like it was apropos for the fact that we are coming into the Hawaii Ironman World Championship, is championship mindset. What the mindset of champions have when they arrive at championships. And I do this. This is not about the Hawaii Ironman. This is for anyone. But I think that there are lessons that we can draw from the most successful athletes with some of the traits, some of the mindsets that they have in framing the races, in their planning and preparation and race plans for the races, and then actually when they're thinking about execution. So I want this to, while it is before Hawaii, it's not really about Hawaii. It's a championship mindset. And the reason that we label it as so is that the external and internal pressure from an occasion that is a championship tends to heighten. At the same time, that doesn't diffuse the performance for the best in our sport. It doesn't matter that they're necessarily the best, the winners on the day, but people are the best age groupers, the people that have their own personal achievements and do very well. There are traits. So this isn't just about the Jan Frodenos of the world. This is about anyone that gets very close in their performance on race day relative to potential. What's the mindset? What are some of the tools and the tricks? And so I'll dive in, probably take about 15 or 20 minutes to get through. I hope it's helpful. Then we can have a discussion, a roundtable around Q&A. I want to start with, before we dive into the details, I want to start about talking about performance. And I saw a lovely little algorithm equation from a guy called Tim Galway, who is a skills acquisition guy, actually focused around tennis. What does that have to do with triathlon? Why do we talk about this guy, Tim Galway, who I don't know personally, but I read a little piece around him that he wrote around skill acquisition called The Inner Game. It's actually quite interesting. It was just a couple of pages. But he had a nice framework of performance, which is performance on the day is equal to potential minus interference. I thought that's actually really nice. When it relates to triathlon, we can pull that, we can use that, we can talk about that. Performance is your potential minus interference. Well, of course, in triathlon, where does that interference come from? It can come from internal pressures and where you're placing your focus, so getting distracted because of the height of the occasion. It can come from external stresses from outside, either perceived from other people's expectations of you, the environment, the course itself. It can come from other contenders. The list goes on. But there is always, when you actually hit race day, this certain amount of interference that is going to impact your performance being aligned with your potential. And of course, we want ultimately, as Paul will often talk about, your performance, your best aspiration that you can have is that your best swim, your best bike, and your best run in training all lines up on race day collectively. That is typically great performance in triathlon. So we'll dive into the details, but we'll have that as a backdrop as we go through. So we're going to talk about three main things. We're going to talk about framing the race from a mindset standpoint, preparation from a race from a practical and mindset standpoint, and then actual race planning, sort of the actual race execution, as it were, race planning and execution. So the first is framing the race, the mindset. And I think that the most successful people globally tend to embrace and love the journey first. And that frames what a race is. A race is never defining for their passion of the sport, their worth in the sport, who they are as an athlete. It is an occasion that has come out of the love and the joy and the challenge of preparation. And that shifts the relationship with racing for, I think, the best equipped from a mental standpoint. That mindset of embracing the journey and knowing that there will be multiple occasions to race shifts a fear of racing. And when the underlying goal is development, your own personal development, it diffuses the fear of racing. And it frames the race of not being the definition of your worth, either as a person, hopefully not, or as an athlete. And that can help the race be an enjoyable challenge, a celebration, or an opportunity to shine. And in fact, the second piece of that framing of the race is when you have that journey mindset, the championship race is actually a thing of excitement, a thing of challenge, and a pure opportunity to show themselves more than others. And I think that's important, themselves, the fruit of their preparation and labor. So if you are grounded in your joy of the sport, you enjoy the process, you enjoy the progression of self-improvement, races can actually be wonderful opportunities. And the element of test of worth, test of self, consequences of not doing well, really diffuse. The other framing of the race that I think is really important for an elite athlete, for a championship mindset, is familiarity. You tend to race often, at least reasonably often. You don't race as often as a 5K runner or a professional cyclist or anything like that. But most of us don't just do one race. We tend to do multiple races in a row. So racing is familiar. And the mindset of most people when they frame the race that have the championship mindset is this is another race. And so rather than leaning into the occasion, this is a championship, instead they lean into the familiar, I am racing again. And yes, there's an undeniable whip up and frenzy and focus, and often media focus on the occasions. But you have a choice as an athlete to lean into, this is familiar, I have raced before, I know how to race, and this is another race. Or lean into, and often in a paralyzing way, lean into, this is the occasion, this is the destination. And that becomes a less fruitful mindset. So if you lean into the familiar, you embrace the journey, it starts to diffuse and shift the relationship. But what does that mean from a practical mindset? What does it mean from a preparation? So how do you actually do that in a practical sense? Because that's just the umbrella. Well, the most important thing, I think, is leaning into what you know works for you. You have to lean into what you know works for you. And you, because you have raced before, typically, it is madness to try and change things up radically. It's madness to try and do something special. As we go back before, we said your best race is lining up something that you have done before, your best swim, your best bike, and your best run, all on the same day. That's a situation. So as much as you can, lean into what you know. And that might be, if you always travel to a race on the same day, you always like your rhythm of staying near the expo or further out from the expo or with friends or a solo, whatever works for you in your previous races, there's a good chance that you should anchor around the majority of those things being true. Now, sometimes it's impossible to go to the Hawaii Ironman because of the environment, because of the travel across time zones. You probably need to get there a little bit earlier, but you lean into your setup as familiar as you can. You don't make it bigger than it is. You just don't try and do things that are not surprises. And then that goes down to how you prepare for the race with the days leading up to the race, how you go about your warm-up, how you go about your protocol setting up transition, how you go about your fueling globally, perhaps a little more hydration in a hot environment, oh, it happens to be hot in Hawaii, a little more hydration there. But overall, it's leaning into the familiar stuff. So the approach cannot, should not change your race. It happens to be an occasion, but it is another race. And that starts to come down, to then drop down into what I would say the second layer of that, of leaning into what no with a practical mindset, is back your trusted basics. Back your trusted basics. So the same eating habits that you tend to adhere to in other races, adhere to those habits. The same sleeping habits, adhere to those habits. The same race strategy, apply those. Be cognizant of the terrain, be cognizant of the conditions, but that's no different because it's an occasion, a championship, than it is to any other race. So adhere to those habits. And then the final one is equipment. There's nothing that frustrates Paul and I more than one of our professional athletes being asked by a sponsor to change equipment in the week leading up to the race. Ride this new bike, run in these new pair of shoes, ride this new helmet. It changes the relationship, and they go from something trusted that they know works to a risk. And the whole purpose here from a mindset is, I want to do what's familiar, I want to lean into what works, and I want to mitigate risk. And so don't mitigate risk as you go on. And the final component then is lean into your trusted circle. So whoever develops your race plan, whoever reviews your race plan, wherever you get your information from, however much you tend to focus on your race plan, do the same again. And what happens in a championship, because it's an occasion, because there is a lead up, is people, often because of nerves and insecurity, go outside of that circle. And they listen to every Tom, Dick, and Harry about, oh, Jenny looks good, and Simon says the swim's going to be slow and you should swim to the left. And Johnny says it's going to be windy, so you should ride X wheels or whatever it might be. And changing your plan outside your trusted source of influence. Don't do that. Anchor in what has worked before, who has given you good resource, mentorship, advice, and stay there. And those people, the discussion around the race does not need to be massive. It doesn't need to be massive. It needs to be a similar discussion and a similar amount of thought as goes into your regular familiar race. And I think many people get emotionally exhausted going into their A races, going into championship races, because of what I call the daily grind. And that's every day reviewing, rereading, following on social media, trying to glean some special information about the occasion or their race. And they analyze and analyze and analyze until they're exhausted and they just want it off their back. And so instead of doing that, as they approach the race, now into Hawaii, or really last week into Hawaii, give yourself an anchor to say, I need to prepare, I need to think through my approach. So I'm going to do that for 20 minutes or 30 minutes every day, quiet place, pen and paper, think through an element of my race, my swim, my bike, my run, my transition, my terrain management, my fueling, whatever it might be, and then bank it. Then move along and be a person. Then think about something else, then talk about something else. But it will not do you or your popularity amongst your family and friends any good to talk and talk and talk and talk about it. Think about it, bank it, come back to it tomorrow. And if you do that for 14 days going into the race, that is 7 hours, half an hour a day of planning and preparation. That's almost the duration of the race. Certainly the duration of a half Ironman, it's often the duration of an Ironman, or not quite, but you get the point. So trust your trusted circle and go from there. And then the final component is around the actual planning itself of the race. We have a thing that we always talk about, which is race the course, not the competition. And in a championship race, I think that that is certainly the route for 99% of the athletes, 99% of the time, race the course. So that's manage yourself, manage the terrain, manage the conditions. Those are the three things. Manage yourself, manage the terrain, manage the conditions. If you do that, Then the second layer after that is using other competitors in the event to your advantage when helpful, and not letting them disrupt your rhythm and your management of self or conditions or terrain. You don't want to get distracted. Manage yourself, manage the terrain, manage the conditions. That's really important. And then the final elements are two things that you've heard so many times before. Don't obsess about the outcome. Don't judge yourself when you're in the middle of the race. Focus on the doing. Break the course down into sections, execute those sections, focus on the controllable and manage yourself through, and don't be dominated by data. And then finally, expect the unexpected. While we have dreams and aspirations of having a seamless race, we are going to have flows of energy up and down. We are going to have hurdles to overcome. We will go through periods that are challenging, but expect the unexpected, manage the terrain, manage the course, manage yourself, and the outcome is usually as good as it can be. So for me, those are the big three elements. A lot of information there, but lean into what you know, trust your basics and what is familiar, and then manage the terrain, manage the course, and manage the conditions. And after that, I think you should have the best race you can possibly have. Now, I bet Paul could redo that talk in exactly the same way with completely different language. Paulie, did I miss anything there?
No, that was it was pretty comprehensive, and just bullet points, I guess. Putting all your best segments of all your best training sessions together back to back would be a dream scenario. But also know that there's something we want to add onto that for the championship race, that if we've got the formula right, you should be in the best form of your life, or definitely your season, when you go into that race. So don't let the numbers hold you back. The counterweight to that, of course, is you need to race to the conditions. So you may be running faster than you ever run before, but if you're an athlete who doesn't thrive in the heat, don't expect that to translate to your fastest ever marathon in Kona, but it might be your best ever run in the heat. So you need to be prepared to excel on race day, but also don't expect something vastly different to putting all your best segments together back to back, and then have a counterbalance of you need to race to the conditions. That leads into something that we focus on, the doing and the satisfaction of doing each piece of the race well, and then you put it behind you. Ironman New Zealand last year, a lot of people talked themselves out of the race because unless you were a good swimmer, people had horrendous swims, 15, 20 minutes slower than they thought they might, and talked themselves out of the race when in fact the vast majority of the field was in the same place. So you need to race the conditions and then focus on the doing, put it behind you, and get on with the next piece of doing. Part of that also has the use of data. Now, you go to Ironman Kona and you can have this bunch of numbers that you think you're going to make. You need to be able to use the data in a common sense way. What does it mean? When you look at your pace watch in the run, the average when you're running up one of the rolling hills on Palani isn't going to be what you expect your race average to be. It's going to be slower. If you manage the terrain and take a benefit from it, you're going to run a little bit quicker on the downhills. You're not going to look and go, oh, I'm running too fast, and slow down and put the brakes on. There's going to be an ebb and flow. You're going to use the data in a sensible way. And in a hot race, one of the things is to know if you've got heart rate and power, that you need to have a little check and balance between the two of those things. You don't look down at your power on a stinking hot day and go, oh, I'm weak, I'm pathetic, and talk myself out of it, because you may effectively be making 10 or 15% less power because of the heat stress and the appropriate heart rate. So you look at your heart rate and go, this feels right. This is the heart rate that I can operate and sustain, and use that as a guide as well. So with the data, you need to be clever with the use of it. And, the information, the data is only useful if you can do something with it. It's got to add to the race experience. It can't be a handbrake, and it can't be an arbitrary thing that you chase and say this is my worth on the day based on these numbers, because you need to be able to use the numbers smartly. And if you focus on the doing and use those numbers as supplementary information and get value from it, then it's a good thing. If the numbers that you're looking at are confusing, then far better off to ignore the device and go on how you feel and what you're doing at the time, that you focus on doing everything really, really well. And it's no different to any other race. Hopefully you get a little lift from the excitement of it being the big race. But once the gun goes off, it's focus on the doing.
It's, just coming back from Chattanooga, and all the best people in the world were there, and it was a wonderful race. But as you stand there on the sidelines and you watch them, it felt very, very familiar to me, because it was people swimming, people biking, and people running. And it was a race. It was just another race with people, and it unfolded. And you have to remember that to arrive at your championship race, you didn't qualify or you didn't prepare in your previous races by participating in jousting. You participated in triathlons on your lead up. It is still familiar. It is still the same sport. So double down on that and realize that while it might be your A race, while it is the important race, while it might be the world championship in some people's cases, super, great, hopefully that's a lift, but it's still a triathlon. It's still ultimately a triathlon, and it doesn't change. It never changes. It's always the same. All right. Not too bad. I like that you extended on the shackles of the data pool. I just said, don't be a prisoner to the data pool. So who should we start off? Should we start with the good-looking one or the one with hair?
Huh. That would be neither, but yeah.
Go with Marcus. Doing Ironman Florida, so he's got his big race coming up. Any questions?
Yeah, just one maybe on the data point for Paul. So I've noticed through my training this year, typically my bike, I've been right about 140, 220 watts or so. My longer, 80 to 100, plus rides. This year I've been at 130, even in the hotter conditions that we've had in Atlanta during the summer. And actually, I really don't know what to attribute that to. I think part of it, I believe, is, and I've talked with Mike about this, is perhaps because of a lot of the strength endurance training that we've done over the winter, that I've actually become stronger and more efficient at using, those groups of muscles. But, on race day, I expect that to jump up a little bit. Just, based on that, what would be some, I guess, advice or interpretation as to, normally I'd expect to ride and, between about 138, 142-ish, feeling comfortable at that heart rate. But my workouts have generally been lower than that. And I haven't pushed it to try and stay up with that. I've actually, kind of let them come into their own. So,
what's your power been like relative to when you were 140 before and you're now 10 beats lower?
It was comparable. So I really haven't seen a surge in power. I've just seen a drop in heart rate. So, from an efficiency standpoint, it's been about an 8% increase in efficiency, 5 to 8% increase in efficiency because of the drop in heart rate, not because necessarily the increase in power, either, at an FTP 20-minute or even longer distance duration. Really haven't seen a huge uptick in the power. It's just been more of a decrease in the, the corollary, heart rate.
I'd mind, but I'll let.
I would want to have a look at more of the information to know what those heart rates are relative to running maximums, TT maximums and so on, because it could be a really good thing, like you say, that by putting some variety in, allowing the introduction of some, making progress with muscle tension as opposed to just, higher cadence pedaling and so on.
Right.
That's lowered the overall heart rate and the cost over distance. But it would be interesting to know what those percentages are like as far as sustainable heart rates on the run and at maximum, because there could be an opportunity there, and there's still plenty of time to to take advantage of that opportunity, that there may be the ability to produce a few more watts on race day.
Right.
So it would be interesting to have a look at those numbers and see. Bear in mind, we don't get too obsessed in the same way as when you look at a piece of equipment that promises you a 1 watt saving. You need to know that, you know, for a guy that looks about your size, the number of watts at your race speed that it takes to go, you know, half a mile an hour faster, you need a truckload of those 1 watt savings added together to get to that place. So it's going to be that delicate balancing thing. But we could have a look at the numbers a little bit closer and see if there's still an opportunity between now and race day to potentially have that heart rate come up. But you wouldn't want to go making more power than you're comfortable than your trained potential is at the moment, because that will end to it, you know, badly as far as resilience and wear and tear goes. But, you know, Florida's still far enough away that maybe there is the opportunity to dial up that heart rate a little bit more and make a few extra watts. But I would need to look at the numbers a little bit more to know more about that.
Okay.
Do you track your stuff on Training Peaks or anything?
It's on Training Peaks, yeah.
I mean, if you wanted to grab a session, you could rip it apart for you and get information, because I would say if you did nothing, if you're racing, especially on the occasion and on the front part of the ride, if you're seeing 140, you would not be fearful. If you're feeling great and it feels suitable and the heart rate's there, you wouldn't be fearful of it. You wouldn't be like, I've got to hold it 130.
Right.
At the same time, it's sort of like the amount of watts you pile on for speed return. There's also the element of riding your bike plenty fast enough on that course and running really well off.
Right.
So there's not a great return on investment to just dump more watts because you think if it comes to the cost of the bike.
Okay. Yeah, I'll send you a couple of bot files on that, and the run too, the run off. So I've noticed this actually similar, somewhat similar trend, only a few beats lower on the run too, but I've become more efficient on the run off of that. So, but I'll send you a couple of files on that.
Unless your heart rate strap's broken, but that
yeah. No, well, you know that's I use that as, you know, I'm not sitting there dialed into it. It's just, you know, just a check-in, you know, based off the form. So it's a check-in, right?
The assumption that the equipment's right, that's a really good thing, that they're both kind of gone like that. Yeah. But that tells us a bit more right there.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. That's really good. Scotty, welcome. You're sitting a little silhouetted, but you're coming off of a couple of weeks of celebration after getting married. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I think my heart rate monitor strap is broken too. Clearly, every time I go out for a run, what used to be like my zone 1 warm-up is now heart rate through the roof, and I feel like I'm about to die. So
you're out of shape, you don't train properly, and you're overworked and over-traveled. So
yeah,
equipment is, without even looking at it, your equipment is functioning very just that your equipment is not functioning.
No, yeah, it's the equipment that counts that isn't working anymore. That's the problem.
Important equipment is the one that's faulty.
It's storing up for winter rapidly here.
It's hibernate. What can we do for you, if anything, apart from give you hope?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot you can do for me, but right now there's you know, no direct questions that I would. Like I say,
well, this is going to be our last meeting to Matt. We haven't had any for a couple of weeks because I've been under the weather and everything else that's been going on. But any last words for the folks that are going to Kona? We're going to all the ones actually staying at home as much as anything, because we're going to see the folks that are going to be in Kona. But,
Nothing more to add at this stage.
Don't mess it up. Well, the last thing I'll say is we are going to, as I mentioned at the top of the call, we're going to refresh the way that we go about communication via video. We're going to do a couple of things, and I'll give you a very quick teaser now. So we are actually, in the coming month or two, we are actually going to launch a podcast that will be open to everyone, a Purple Patch podcast that will be around actually human performance. it'll never lose our triathlon roots, but we're going to talk a lot about human performance, life performance, sleep, travel, and have a lot of discussion with experts in field, as well as people that we work with outside of the triathlon space, with some business people and things like that. So that's going to be fun. That will be a start for, obviously, a podcast for everyone. We're going to double down in the coming months on content. So one of the things that we're going to do with the education library is a complete reorganization of the content we do have, first of all, to make it more intuitive for you guys to find, categorizing subjects to make it a bit more deep diving into subjects that you want to have. And then parallel to that, we're going to go on a content generation spree. So we're going to do some highly produced videos, 2-minute, 4-minute, 6-minute, 20-minute, 30-minute videos on everything around triathlon and triathlon performance, diving into why we do the sessions, doing some really hands-on skill-based video production on some of the things we're talking about, MFP running being a great example, so that you guys can go and find more, but find richer content that's professionally produced that is helpful for you on a deep dive into any subject. So that's going to be a real emphasis to make things a little bit more at your fingertips. And then these sessions will morph into really regular special events that will really build around for all Purple Patch athletes. We'll probably shift platforms, and rather than just doing every Monday, Thursday, we'll shift them to be a little less regular. I'm not sure on, but probably every other week we'll do a landmark come all webinar, probably via Zoom meeting, that can really be rich discussion for myself and Paul to create. So that's our thinking, and the reason that we want to do it is we want to do a couple of things. We want to continue the opportunity for these discussions, but we want to open it up so that the group learning can really be effective, but each one of them really counts. But in conjunction, in parallel to that, we want to provide you with an evolution of content in both in terms of quality, breadth of content, so that it's and depth of content, so that you can really do deep dives. And if we really put a lot of energy into that, and then organize it well, so that you can actually go to your portal website and go in and say, I want to learn about training at altitude, and you can dive into the environment factor, and you can drop down and go as deep as you want on altitude. Or I want to learn in operating in heat, and it can take you down on a journey that you can do as much as the physiological impact of heat, fueling in heat, hydration in heat, race plan, terrain management, and everything we talked about, travel and protocol, so easily searchable. That's our mission. So we want to sort of reorganize some of the really rich content that we currently have, that we do a very good job of hiding from you, and because it's not necessarily, in my mind, intuitive to find, and reorganize that so that we can make use of the good stuff, but then go on a spree of our creative, so that we can really help you. And there's the theoretical side, which is everything that Paul and I talk about and all of those discussions. And then there's the practical side. We want to do a whole bunch of cycling, running, and swimming videos to really help you with, hey, I'm not sure what this is, boom, very easily you can go and get it. And we think that that's going to be really useful for every level of Purple Patch athlete, from people that are just coming in and participating in the education, all the way up to, dare I say it, our professional athletes. And hopefully, if we get really good, we can synchronize that with the time of year. We can start to synchronize it with your training programs, and we can start to nudge it to you in a very smart way, so that when you don't know what you're going to think, but we can tell you, and hopefully in the future we can get there. So I just wanted to give you that sort of little teaser, so that you know that we're working very, very hard on that side. Education is such an important part for Paul and I, to help you guys understand what we're thinking, the methodology, the intent, the rhythm of training, help you, empower you to self-manage. That it's not without massive commitment and thought that we want to do it, but we want to do it the right way. So for the next season, over the coming months, you can expect big change on that side. You guys have all heard or read about the changes of the relaunches of the coaching products with custom programming and one-to-one coaching now taking place of the previous products. There is no more performance, premium, and executive coaching. And in all honesty, the reason we've done that is that while we were sort of proud of our products, we weren't satisfied. And we started from an athlete-first mindset. What do athletes tell us they want? What do they need? We tried to listen, and then we tried to create based off of that and what we feel like we need to ultimately get to the ultimate goal, which is to help you guys improve. And so that was our mindset. And so I encourage you to read through the emails that you received from us, individual emails that you received if you have to take action, or some of the bulletins that we'll put out. And we're posting all that to the website to digest. So thanks as ever. Last thing I'll say is pre-order the book. But most importantly, if you could do me a personal favor, share the book with people, because these are the most important dates, and I would like it to be successful. But this 30 days and the next 90 days after launch will define the success of the book. And so if you believe in Purple Patch, it would be very much appreciated if you could share it via all your sources. Scott, if you could send it to your 7 followers on Twitter, at least 3 of them will purchase it, and maybe they will have a following.
Sounds like a plan.
But you never know, it might go viral because of one of those 7. So Paul will post it to Twitter, but he doesn't have any followers. Okay. Anyone else got anything before we go? I have to say it's fun to be back. I apologize. Marcus will follow up, but I hope the last prep goes well into Florida.
Thanks. I sent those your way, so you'll look out for them shortly. Appreciate it. Okay.
And Paul and I, for our athletes, Paul and I are just about to live 1 week in a washing machine. That's what it's like for 7 days. So we won't know which way is up, but we'll keep a cool head while we're spinning around and around.
Good. All right. Enjoy. Have fun. Good luck.
Cheers, guys.
Okay. All right.